joining the same team and training together. The two Koreas have agreed to join forces for next month's Winter Olympics in PyeongChang. It's the most striking breakthrough yet after a wave of sports diplomacy that began last week. Can it get worse than this? South Korea battles to breathe through high levels of fine dust yet again, with a wave of yellow dust from China making matters even more unbearable. Plus, Korea's biggest airport gets even bigger. Incheon International Airport's second terminal officially opens. It's hoped Terminal 2 will service 100 million passengers annually by 2023. Now, we'll get to the pre-Olympic diplomatic breakthrough between the two Koreas in just a moment. But let's start with an issue that's becoming an increasingly serious concern for everyone living here in Korea. Unfortunately, we are going to have to struggle through another day of foul air here in South Korea. Fine dust levels are still in the unhealthy range this morning, with levels of the particulate known as PM 2.5, the most dangerous kind to our health, still hovering at around 160 micrograms per cubic meter, 3 times higher than what the Korean government deems safe, and 8 times higher than the international standard set by the World Health Organization. On top of that, a blanket of yellow dust from China is set to pound Korea again today, choking us out even more. Because of the terrible air, Seoul is keeping its pollution emergency measures in place for a second straight day. For the first time ever, citizens can ride public transport for free during the morning and evening rush hours, and public sector workers are advised to leave their cars at home. Now, on a happier note, in just over 3 weeks from now, we are going to see a monumental moment for the two Koreas, the South and North marching together under one flag. In a stunning move, both South and North Korea have agreed to walk hand in hand behind a joint flag at next month's Winter Olympics in PyeongChang. And in another dramatic gesture of reconciliation, the two sides will become one on the ice hockey rink. Ji Myung-gil with the details.
The two Koreas have decided to jointly enter the opening ceremony as one team at next month's PyeongChang Winter Olympics. Both South and North Korean delegations will hold the unified Korean flag, which shows the Korean peninsula as they jointly march in. In addition, a joint women's ice hockey team will be formed, and the details of this decision will be ironed out with the International Olympic Committee. During the PyeongChang Winter Olympics, North Korea will send a cheering squad of 230 people, which will cheer for both the South and North Korean teams. The North will also send a 30-member taekwondo team to perform in PyeongChang and the South Korean capital of Seoul, with the dates yet to be announced. North Korea also agreed to send a group of journalists, while South Korea agreed to provide support in their coverage of the Games. The North Korean delegation of athletes will arrive in South Korea on February 1st, while the cheering squad, taekwondo demonstration team, and journalists will do so on February 7th. They will all use the Gyeonggi Line train as a means of transportation to get into South Korea. Prior to the Games, Seoul will send an inspection team on January 23rd to the 25th, while Pyongyang will send an on-site inspection team on January 25th through the 27th. This comes as the two Koreas agree to jointly prepare and hold cultural events in North Korea's Mount Kumgang Resort before the PyeongChang Winter Olympics, as well as conduct joint training among ski athletes at the Masikryong Ski Resort in North Korea. As for the Paralympic Games in PyeongChang, the North will send representatives, athletes, cheering squad, art performers, and journalists, totaling 150 people. Further details are expected to be discussed through the Inter-Korean communication channel in Panmunjom. Now the two Koreas plan to discuss the results of Wednesday's talks with the International Olympic Committee on Saturday, January 20th in Lausanne, Switzerland. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
So, with the two sides agreeing to enter the opening ceremony behind one flag, it looks as though the Koreas are on the path to a peaceful PyeongChang Winter Olympics, but some key details still need to be ironed out, including the athletes' uniform. Our Lee Ji-won tells us more.
The first time South and North Korea marched into a sporting event together was at the 2000 Sydney Olympics, and since then they've done it 8 more times, the most recent being the 2007 Southeast Asian Games in China. Under the name Korea, athletes from the two sides marched in, holding the unification flag. Their entrance music was the much-loved traditional folk song Arirang. And while countries usually have one flag bearer, the unified team Korea has always had 2 flag bearers, one from each side, a male and a female, with the genders alternating at each event. For the opening ceremony in PyeongChang, it'll be a male athlete from the south and a female athlete from the north. These are the same conditions as when South and North entered together at events here in South Korea, namely the 2002 Busan Asian Games and 2003 Summer Universiade in Daegu. But some experts say that while the two sides might come in together this time too, they'll do so each holding their own flag.
This Olympics holds a great deal of meaning to South Koreans since we failed numerous times before finally getting to host the Winter Games. But to not see the national flag of the host country could be quite disappointing to many. Also, the international community's perception of North Korea has changed very much compared to 10 years ago due to Pyongyang's aggressive nuclear development, so it's something to be discussed.
The uniform for the athletes at the opening and closing ceremonies is also something to keep an eye on. The uniforms for some 100 South Korean athletes and dignitaries have already been made, and they feature the South Korean flag taegukgi. But some experts say they might need a slight change if the two Koreas are going to walk in together.
Previously, at the 2006 Turin Winter Olympics, North Korean athletes wore uniforms for the ceremony proposed by South Korea, which did not have much written on them. But it might not be so simple with the design we have now. But then again, if the North Koreans do wear this uniform, I think the taegukgi stitched on the left side of the chest will be covered with the unification flag.
With Seoul and Pyongyang marching in together at a global sporting event for the first time in 11 years, there are a lot of details to be discussed. But experts say it'll be a great opportunity to promote PyeongChang 2018 as a Peace Olympics and show the world the need for peace in the Korean peninsula. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, staying with the Olympic theme, President Moon Jae-in paid a visit to the country's National Training Center in Central Korea on Wednesday to show his support for Korea's Olympians. He asked for the athletes' support in making the upcoming global sporting event the Peace Games. Our chief Cheongwade correspondent Moon Gon-young reports.
하나, 둘, 셋. South Korea's national ice hockey team's pre-game chant highlighting teamwork. President Moon Jae-in visited the National Training Center in Incheon, roughly 100 kilometers south of Seoul, where the nation's Olympic squad has been working day and night, vying for the podium at the Winter Olympic Games in PyeongChang, now just a little over 3 weeks away. One of the first athletes the South Korean president went to throw support were the ice hockey players, amid ongoing talks between South and North Korea of fielding a joint women's hockey team at the PyeongChang Olympics.
앞으로 실현될지 안 될지 잘 모르겠지만 또 이제 북한이 올림픽 참가를 하면서 또 아이스하키 팀의 단일팀까지 이제 논의가 되고 있는데 그 성사 여부를 떠나서 그런 것이 우리 아이스하키 팀에 보다 많은 국민들의 관심을 쏟게 만드는.
A joint team at the Games would require IOC approval, but if realized, it will be the Korea's first unified Olympic team, leaving a major mark in sports diplomacy that often mirror rocky inter-Korean ties. Nonetheless, there's been worries in South Korea that adding new players at a time when the Olympics are less than a month away would eventually weaken the team power and deprive South Korean players of due playing time. But ahead of having lunch with the nation's Olympic squad at the training center cafeteria, President Moon again labeled this year's Winter Olympics the Peace Games.
함께 공동 입장을 하거나 또 단일팀을 만들 수 있다면 북한이 단순히 참가하는 것 이상으로 남북 관계를 발전시켜 나가는 훨씬 더 좋은 그런 단초가 되지 않을까 기대합니다.
At this point, it definitely seems that diplomatic acrobatics have paved the way for North Korea to send a national delegation to the South next month to the Olympics. Whether this is only a momentary cooling period or a longer-lasting ratcheting down of tensions in the peninsula, only time will tell. But what's for sure is that it's in the hands of President Moon to now translate this opening of a temporary channel for dialogue with the North Korean regime into a window for nuclear dialogue, not only between the two Koreas, but between the U.S. and North Korea. 문건영, Arirang News, The Blue House.
Now, US President Donald Trump says he's willing to hold direct talks with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, but doesn't think an actual meeting would resolve the North Korean nuclear issue. In an interview with Reuters, President Trump said he was uncertain talks would lead to anything meaningful, noting negotiations with Pyongyang by previous US administrations have not been successful. He expressed hope to resolve the North Korean issue in a peaceful way, but thinks it's very possible that he can't. 20 top diplomats from countries around the world, including South Korea, the US, Japan and Canada, have expressed support for inter-Korean dialogue following a North Korea-focused security forum in Vancouver. In a joint statement Wednesday, the countries agreed to take steps to impose unilateral sanctions on North Korea that go beyond the requirements stipulated by UN Security Council resolutions. North Korea was quick to condemn the Vancouver meeting as a provocation. North Korea's deputy ambassador to the United Nations in Geneva denounced it as really harmful and dangerous. He added the North is truly committed to fight against sanctions and they are ready for both dialogue and confrontation. Now, this is coming in. The Bank of Korea has kept its benchmark interest rate unchanged, frozen at 1.5%. This follows the first rate hike in over 6 years in November, when the central bank raised its record low interest rate by a 0.25 percentage point, starting to tighten its monetary policy. The rate freeze is in line with the BOK governor's cautious tone earlier this month. We'll have more details during our next newscast at noon Korea time. The ruling Democratic Party of Korea and the government have vowed all-out efforts to minimize the fallout from the minimum wage hike. Meeting on Thursday morning, the two sides agreed to lay out additional measures that would lessen the burden on micro businesses and the self-employed following the over 16% hike that took effect on New Year's Day. The ruling party said the minimum wage hike is the first step in ending income disparity and polarization and, in turn, the slump in domestic consumption. The party said it will seek to revise related laws so they can reduce the burden on employers. The government noted that many people are still not aware of the support fund that the government has set aside, saying it will step up efforts so micro businesses can take advantage of the programme. It added that while the hike may seem like a burden in the short run, the benefits will show in the long term, especially when the full impact of the support fund kicks in starting in March. Now, Terminal number 2 has been added to the country's largest airport, Incheon International Airport, and flights have already started going in and out of that terminal. Cha Sang-mi tells us how not to get lost and, more importantly, how to avoid missing your flight.
Korea's main gateway, Incheon Airport, is opening its new passenger terminal on Thursday. Incheon International Airport Corporation and the Transport Ministry have advised airlines to mark the boarding terminal in red on passengers' e-tickets to help avoid confusion. Terminal 2 will host 4 SkyTeam airlines, Korean Air, Delta, Air France, and KLM. And Terminal 1 will operate 86 other carriers, including Asiana Airlines, T-Way, and EasterJet. The separation of operating airlines is designed to consider the terminal's capacity, boarding convenience, and operating efficiency. Directions to the airport have also changed. When driving, the roads separate at the airport entrance junction, but both terminals can be approached from the airport Newtown junction as well. And in case passengers arrive at the wrong terminal, there are shuttle buses and trains that connect the two terminals. But passengers need to take into account the time required to travel between terminals, as the shuttle bus takes 15 minutes from Terminal 1 to Terminal 2 and 18 minutes going the other way. The airport railroad takes just 6 minutes, but the train only runs every 12 minutes. The new terminal is easy to reach using public transportation, as the airport limousine buses, airport railroad, and KTX have all extended their operation to Terminal 2. The new terminal has all-inclusive transportation center with trains, buses, and short-term parking. Airport guides and employees will be available to help passengers reach the right terminal. The first flight is an early morning flight from Manila. 차상미, Arirang News.
Now, Hyundai Motor and its affiliate Kia Motors set a new sales record in Europe last year. According to the European Automobile Manufacturers Association, Hyundai and Kia sold a combined 995,000 vehicles, a 5.8% increase compared to 2016. Hyundai sales went up 3.5%, while Kia soared by 8.5% on year. The sales spike also pushed the Korean automakers to the 7th largest market share in the lucrative European auto market. Now, more stay-at-home dads taking care of the kids and doing the housework. The latest government data here in Korea shows the number of house husbands in the country hit a record high last year. And experts say the shift comes amid changing gender stereotypes and more women in the workforce. Won Jong-hwan reports.
The number of husbands in Korea who are taking primary care of household chores or children is on the rise. According to Statistics Korea on Wednesday, the number of full-time house husbands reached 170,000 last year, up from 161,000 in the previous year. Last year's number is the highest since 2003, when Statistics Korea began collecting such data. The number of full-time housewives, meanwhile, has been declining since 2014. The number was around 6.9 million last year, a fall of nearly 100,000 housewives from the year before. These figures do not include parents on maternity or paternity leave. But according to an official from the Ministry of Employment and Labor, the number of men applying for paternity leave and pay is also on the rise.
In the case of males who applied for parental leave, the figure was around 7,100 in 2016, accounting for 8.5% of the total parental leave. However, last year, more than 12,000 males applied, which is around 13% of the total parental leave.
As part of its efforts to boost South Korea's low birth rate and ease the burden of childcare, the South Korean government has been encouraging paternity leave, including implementing paid paternity leave in 2001.
There are policies to support this. The Ministry of Labor has been encouraging paternity leave since last September by expanding the limit of monthly pay to nearly $1,500 in the first 3 months.
And this paternity leave recipient also says there's been a change in the way men perceive childcare and household chores.
If in the past men were more focused on their working life outside their homes, I think that those values have changed in recognizing the importance of family and spending more time at home with the children.
Statistics Korea also attributed the rising number of full-time house husbands and the fall in housewives to changing gender roles following the growing employment of women and the early retirement of male employees. As past stereotypes about gender roles are changing in Korea, it is likely that the proportion of men staying home to raise a family will continue to increase. Won Jong-hwan, Arirang News.
Now for a look at the stories making headlines around the world, and we start with new developments from last year's deadly collisions involving 2 US Navy destroyers. The former commanders of the USS Fitzgerald and the USS John S. McCain are facing charges of negligent homicide. For more on this and other news, let's turn, as we always do, to our No Adam. So Adam, the US Navy has been reeling from some really tough questions arising from the two collisions. And now, finally, we are seeing some answers.
That's right, Mark. The two being charged for negligent homicide are Bryce Benson, former commander of the USS Fitzgerald, and Alfredo Sanchez, who is the former commander of the USS John S. McCain. The Fitzgerald collided with a Philippine container ship last June, leaving 7 American sailors dead. 2 months later, 10 sailors were killed after the John S. McCain crashed into an oil tanker near Singapore. 4 officers from the Fitzgerald will also face similar charges, which include dereliction of duty, endangering a ship, and also negligent homicide. A chief petty officer from the McCain also faces a charge of dereliction of duty. The disciplinary actions were decided by Admiral Frank Caldwell and are the latest in a series of moves the Navy has made in the aftermath of the deadly collisions, which investigators concluded were preventable. The Navy's investigation had found that many of the decisions leading to the Fitzgerald crash were the result of poor judgment and decision-making by the commanding officer, as well as multiple other failures. Insufficient knowledge and proficiency of the ship's steering system were attributed to the McCain crash. The Navy has been under fire for the lackluster handling of operations and began a review to improve its training, manning, as well as procedures. At least 12 people are said to have been killed and some 50 others injured after twin suicide bombings hit a market in Nigeria. Witnesses said the attack happened on Wednesday afternoon, local time, with a female bomber striking inside the market in the northern city of Maiduguri, while a male attacker remained outside, killing only himself. The market in the Muna Garage area of the Borno state capital is largely used by refugees from a nearby camp. No group immediately claimed responsibility for the attacks, but the militant group Boko Haram frequently carries out attacks in that area. Also, on the same day, 2 Americans and 2 Canadians were reportedly kidnapped in Kaduna State in central Nigeria while traveling to the capital city of Abuja. Adult film star Stephanie Clifford, otherwise known as Stormy Daniels, has alleged that President Trump paid her hush money to keep quiet about an affair that took place in 2006. In Touch magazine published a 2011 interview with Clifford on Wednesday, in which she said the affair happened less than 4 months after Trump's wife Melania gave birth to their son Barron. The revelation surfaced last week when the Wall Street Journal reported that Clifford was given $130,000 for her silence. Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, who reportedly arranged the payout, has denied Trump had a sexual encounter with Clifford.
Good morning. Toxic smog from China and stagnant airflow have boosted dust levels to very high levels across the entire nation today, with an ultra-fine dust advisory in place for the capital. And what's more, yellow dust will also blow in this afternoon, so people of all ages are advised to stay indoors on a dusty day like today. Nothing to complain about for the temperature readings though. Seoul will make it to 6 degrees Celsius this afternoon, and most parts will be under mostly sunny skies, but expect low visibility due to the thick layer of toxic smog. Colder air will move in starting Friday morning, then we'll have another band of real bone-chilling temperatures throughout next week. With that, let's take a look at the international weather for viewers around the world. While the entire nation will have a dusty day along with relatively mild readings here in South Korea, most cities in North Korea will notice much colder temperatures today. And as for the rest of Asia, Beijing and New Delhi will also have a smog-filled day, but those of you in Japan will have much cleaner air. Meanwhile, Melbourne looks set to push 40 degrees Celsius today into Friday, which could be a threat to tennis players at the Australian Open. Heading to North America, in the U.S., hundreds of flights were canceled across the South and Northeast on Wednesday as travelers walk up to a vicious mix of winter weather, so be sure to double-check your schedules beforehand. And as for South America, other than Bogota, major cities will be under plenty of sunshine. Taking you to Europe, Stockholm and Moscow will be snowy and freezing all day on Thursday. Lastly, to Africa, temperatures will soar in Cape Town along with strong gusty winds. And that's all the weather update for now.
And that's where we're going to leave the news for now as well on this Thursday morning here in Seoul. Our next bulletin is coming up at noon Korea time, so until then, goodbye.